The Ukrainian Leopard tank crushed forward through thick mud, its steel treads roaring like thunder as it rolled straight over Russian trenches. Soldiers scattered below, their shouts swallowed by the deafening growl of the engine. Then silence. Smoke drifted lazily through the air, the battlefield frozen in disbelief. For one long moment, time itself seemed to stop. But this wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning of something far bigger than anyone had imagined. What started as a localized push would soon erupt into a full-scale counteroffensive that shattered one of Russia's most fortified defense lines. Moments later, Bradleys, Leopards, and waves of infantry surged forward in perfect coordination, catching the defenders off guard and rewriting the rhythm of the battlefield. What happened next would turn a single breakthrough into one of the most chaotic and unforgettable clashes of the entire war. Hours before that moment, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones had been silently sweeping the front line. They drifted above the fog and debris, scanning the terrain with cold precision. Through the grainy feed, operators spotted something massive hidden behind the tree line, a network of trenches, camouflaged bunkers, and armored vehicles tucked beneath layers of netting. This wasn't a checkpoint. It was a fortress built to withstand anything. For days, Russian forces had turned this sector into a wall of iron and earth, reinforced with barbed wire, anti-tank traps, and layered artillery support. Any frontal assault here was supposed to be suicide. Yet Ukrainian commanders saw opportunity where others saw risk. Breaking this line could unravel an entire supply corridor, forcing Russian troops to retreat miles eastward. Inside a dimly lit command post, officers huddled over the live drone feed, tracing routes, calculating angles, and forming a plan that balanced precision with audacity. The idea wasn't to overwhelm, it was to surgically dismantle. Bradleys and M113s would lead the spearhead, supported by tanks and precision artillery. Every move had to be exact. A single mistake could destroy the entire strike group. As night fell, soldiers readied their gear. The air inside the staging area was thick with quiet tension. No one spoke much. Helmets locked in place, rifles clicked, engines growled to life one by one. Every man there understood what was waiting beyond the horizon, and none of them expected to come back unchanged. Before any of them moved, one final command came through. When the first shot was fired, it would light up the entire sky. Just before dawn, that moment arrived. A single order cracked over the radio. Fire. The stillness shattered instantly as Ukrainian Grad launchers unleashed a full storm of 122mm rockets. Dozens of fiery trails arced into the night, turning darkness into daylight in a matter of seconds. The first impacts were devastating. Trenches vanished beneath plumes of dirt and shrapnel. Bunkers exploded like paper targets, and the ground trembled under the weight of the assault. For miles, the earth quaked as the barrage continued, relentless and unyielding. This wasn't chaos. It was precision. Each strike was guided by live drone coordinates, targeting command posts, ammunition dumps, and dugouts with surgical accuracy. Russian radios erupted with confusion as commanders shouted conflicting orders, their communications splintered by static. Smoke blanketed the entire front, cutting off vision and isolating units that once moved as one. When the final barrage ended, the world went quiet again, eerily quiet. Then the engine started. The first wave of armored vehicles began their push, Bradleys leading, M113s behind, infantry packed tight. The assault was in motion, and there was no turning back. The smoke hung low when the first Bradley emerged through it, headlights slicing across the haze. Its armor still radiated heat from the earlier blasts. Behind it, M113s rolled forward, engines churning through the churned-up mud. The command post fed live coordinates into every vehicle. The drone feeds above provided real-time updates. Keep formation. Keep the pace, came the calm, clipped voice through the comms. Then the Bradley opened fire. The cannon's burst ripped across the trenches ahead, echoing through the fields like a rolling drumbeat. Return fire sparked off its armor, but the vehicle pressed forward without hesitation. Behind it, the M113 dropped its ramp, releasing infantry who sprinted into cover, forming staggered lines as they advanced. Every move was measured, every shot deliberate. The soldiers flowed like a single living machine, Bradleys suppressing, infantry advancing, tanks guarding the flanks. Through the drones above, commanders watched a miracle unfold. The line that had been deemed impenetrable was breaking faster than anyone expected. Russian positions that had survived the initial barrage were being shredded by direct fire. Ukrainian squads cleared trench after trench, moving with fierce momentum. Yet even as ground was gained, no one relaxed. They all knew what was coming next. Beyond the ridge, the Russian counterattack was forming. Heavy armor, fresh artillery, a wave meant to crush the assault before it spread. Inside one of the Bradleys, a voice came through the static. Advance to the next line. Don't stop for anything. The convoy surged ahead into the storm, and that's when the Russian counterfire began. A distant rumble rolled across the fields, a deep, rhythmic sound that sent a chill through every soldier. It wasn't thunder, it was artillery. Seconds later, the air was filled with the high-pitched shriek of incoming shells. A Russian 152-meter howitzer had zeroed in. The first explosion hit dangerously close, a blast of dirt and fire swallowing the forward unit, then another, and another. Each shell landed closer than the last, slicing the earth apart like a plow. "Move! Move now!" shouted a voice over the radio. radio. Vehicles swerved through the haze, infantry diving for cover as explosions shook the ground. Visibility dropped to nothing. All that existed was the roar of engines and the thunder of impact. Inside the operations room, Ukrainian commanders watched the drone feed flicker in static, brief flashes of fire, fragments of chaos. The Russians weren't firing blindly anymore. They were correcting in real time. Forward spotters were hiding somewhere near the tree line, guiding the shells with deadly precision. One more hit could cripple the entire assault column. Then a drone pilot spoke up. "I have them. Sending coordinates now." A small Mavic drone zipped through the smoke, catching a glimpse of the Russian battery hidden near a row of shattered barns. The data went out instantly. Within seconds, a mortar team miles behind the front adjusted their sights and fired. The first 122mm round whistled through the air and landed perfectly on target. One hit was all it took. The howitzer vanished in a cloud of smoke, its crew scattering. The follow-up rounds finished the job. Relief flooded the comms, but it didn't last. Farther along the line, new artillery flashes appeared. The Russians were bringing everything they had. The entire sector was alive with fire again. Ukrainian troops sprinted across the field, dodging shells, moving between cover, never stopping. The unspoken rule echoed in every mind. If they stop moving, they die. The air was heavy with dust and fear, but the advance didn't slow. Just when it seemed the bombardment couldn't get worse, the ominous buzz of a drone cut through the chaos. The soldiers froze. That sound meant eyes, enemy eyes, watching them from above. Moments later, the shelling stopped. Silence again. The Ukrainian units knew what that meant. They pushed forward anyway, weapons raised, stepping into the trenches. The air inside was suffocating, dark, close, and filled with the echo of distant gunfire. A voice over the radio whispered, "Contact 30 meters. Mortars fired again. Sharp, precise." The first hit blew apart a dugout, forcing the Russians into the open. That was the cue. Ukrainian troops stormed in. Grenades first, then rifles, then raw instinct. The fight turned into chaos. The narrow walls funneled everything into close-range combat. One soldier rounded a corner and came face-to-face with an enemy fighter. One burst, one heartbeat, silence. Another team cleared a side trench, communication by hand signals alone. The air was thick with smoke, the stench of fuel, the metallic tang of adrenaline. It wasn't clean. It wasn't orderly. It was survival. But step by step, the Ukrainians took ground. Commanders watched the drone feed as flashes of muzzle fire danced across the trenches like lightning. The Russian line began to buckle. Some soldiers fought to the end, others fled into the smoke. A few crawled from the rubble with their hands raised. When the last gun went quiet, there was no cheer, just the sound of heavy breathing and boots crunching through mud. They had taken the line, but the victory came with a warning over the radio. Multiple armored contacts. East sector. They're coming back. Engines thundered again, this time closer. Reinforcements were arriving, but not all of them were friendly. Ukrainian scouts reported vehicles approaching. Then the radio broke in with a calmer voice. "Friendly armor inbound. Reinforcements en route." Within minutes, the ground shook beneath the weight of Ukrainian APCs and T-64 tanks rolling in to solidify the line. Soldiers lifted their heads, exhaustion replaced by determination. The battle wasn't over, it was escalating. Commanders watching from above saw the enemy doing the same. A Russian armored column pushing to counterattack. Orders went out fast. Ukrainian 2S-7 artillery units locked into position, barrels lifting toward the sky. The first round fired, the whistling sound slicing the air before a flash erupted on the horizon. Russian vehicles scattered under the rain of shells. The frontline infantry seized the moment, advancing under the cover of the bombardment. APCs dropped their ramps, squads sprinting through the chaos. Every move was deliberate. This wasn't defense anymore, it was dominance. Then came the sound that changed everything, the low growl of a machine unlike the rest. The Leopard. Sleek, modern, and menacing, it rolled through the smoke like a phantom. The soldiers who saw it pass knew the tone of the battle had shifted. "Now it's our turn," one of them muttered. The tank wasn't there to hold the line. It was there to end it. Within seconds, it fired. A Russian APC in the distance vanished in a burst of flame. Another followed. 2 kills in half a minute. The Russian front cracked open as panic spread. The Leopard didn't stop. It accelerated, charging straight into the ruins of the Russian trenches. The ground shook beneath its weight. Dirt collapsed. Soldiers ran, throwing down rifles as the tank crushed through what had once been their stronghold. From the drones above, the footage was unbelievable. A single tank, supported by Bradleys on the flanks, had pierced the heart of the defense. The Russians scrambled, their command channels filled with chaos. Within an hour, the line that had stood for months was gone. The Leopard stopped at the tree line, armor blackened, guns steaming. Around it, Ukrainian troops secured the ground. The battlefield looked like the aftermath of a storm. Trenches destroyed, vehicles burning, smoke rising like fog. But before the dust could settle, the Russians revealed their last weapon. An FPV drone armed and hunting. In a hidden outpost miles away, a Russian operator locked eyes on the next target, a Ukrainian T-64 escorting infantry. "Target acquired," he muttered. The drone screamed through the air, closing distance fast. "It's coming in!" shouted a voice over Ukrainian comms. The feed cut to static as the drone struck the tank's front armor. Smoke billowed. For a moment it looked finished. Then the T-64's engine roared back to life. It didn't retreat. It accelerated. Straight ahead. The tank plowed over Russian dugouts, crushing the positions that had been firing seconds earlier. Panic erupted across the Russian net. Soldiers ran in every direction as the damaged tank rolled through their defenses like a monster out of the smoke. The Ukrainian command center erupted in disbelief. They tried to stop it, one officer laughed. Now they're running from it. By the time the dust settled, the Russians had fled or surrendered. A single tank, hit, scorched, and left for dead, had broken an entire line. When the guns finally fell silent, the battlefield didn't look real anymore. The air was heavy with smoke and the bitter scent of burned fuel. Black plumes rose where the Russian armor had stood just hours earlier. Across the scarred earth, Ukrainian soldiers moved cautiously, scanning for movement. They weren't cheering. They were processing what they'd just lived through. The Leopard stood near the tree line, armor dented but proud. The T-64 still idled nearby, its crew standing beside it, exhausted, dust-covered but alive. They had done the impossible, not because they were invincible, but because they refused to stop. Commanders watched the feeds in silence. The operation, once deemed near impossible, had succeeded beyond expectation. The Russian defense that was supposed to last weeks had collapsed in a single day. Yet no one called it a clean victory. Every crater, every twisted vehicle, every scorched patch of earth carried the memory of how close it had all come to failure. Still, the truth was undeniable. Coordination, precision, and resilience had overcome entrenched strength. As night fell, soldiers sat against their vehicles, breathing in the heavy quiet of the battlefield. The radios buzzed with brief updates, positions secured, lines reinforced, drones circling above. One soldier stared into the dark horizon and whispered, "If this was just one battle, imagine what's coming next." Nobody answered. They didn't need to. Every man there understood. This wasn't just a victory, it was a warning. The tide was shifting slowly but unmistakably. The Leopard's engine finally shut down with a deep metallic sigh. The battlefield went still. For the first time in hours, there was peace. But beneath that silence, everyone knew the truth. This war was far from over, and the next fight